Good morning. My name is Susan Reardon. I'm the staff hearing officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, October 20th to order. Today we have 3 items on the agenda, and I'm going to move item B, which is 4119 San Martin Way, to the end, because I think there'll be some additional discussion on that item, and so I don't want to make item C, 3735 Lincolnwood, sit through that, and so we will hear item B last. I don't have any announcements or appeals. So is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the staff hearing officer on items not on today's agenda? No? Seeing no one, we will move to the first item, which is 468 Conejo Road. If the applicant would like to come up to the table. Good morning.
Okay, the first item is 468 Conejo Road. This is a property that was destroyed in the T fire. It was previously developed with a single-family home and a detached garage, very much in this footprint. The orange outline here actually does outline the pre-existing footprint of the prior structures. It's A1 zoning with 35-foot front setbacks and 15-foot interior setbacks. So this green here depicts the setbacks on the property, and as you can see, that orange footprint of the prior residence encroached into the front interior setbacks. The proposal is to rebuild the residence very much in the similar footprint with just a minor extension around the footprint to give it a minor expansion. So the modifications being requested are to allow that new residence to continue to encroach into the front and interior setbacks. Staff is supportive of the requested modifications due to the minimal expansion of the footprint. It is essentially a rebuild with a minor expansion. It's very low profile architecture. It's single story again, so it would have minimal impacts to the neighbors.
Great, thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Yes, Lori Kari, architect for the client, and I think essentially it is a low impact expansion, and it doesn't have an impact on our immediate neighbor who we've been in close contact with, so we have no other neighbors but one. So I feel like it's an improvement to the neighborhood.
Okay. I do have one question regarding the garage. It's not included in this application before me here. It is non-conforming. It's in the setbacks. 2 covered parking spaces is required for a single-family home, and the condition is that it has to be rebuilt prior to C of O.
Yes, I saw that. And it is under a separate permit because Building and Safety is allowing the previous permit to be accepted. They had a permit in 2007 to rebuild it and reinforce it. And so we are going to use that permit by a different architect, which is very strange. But it will be in exactly the same configuration.
Okay, so that part of the project wouldn't go through plan check again, or just make sure the plans to rebuild is consistent with that? I just get concerned having it prior to the C of O, because C of O, once they make the requirements, it's...
I think if I understand your question, I'm not sure of the status of that particular building permit. If it has to go back through plan check, I'm not up to speed on that. It did go through, and it did get a prior C of O, I believe. So, are you just resubmitting the same plan?
To rebuild it the same, correct.
And because it is going in the exact footprint, it won't require modification to rebuild, which is why it's not part of this application and can be done under a separate permit. We wanted the condition in there to just ensure that permit does in fact get acted upon, the garage does get built so that we don't have a single-family home without the required parking. So is
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, no,
Is
that
it-
answered, because the other concern would be is that it is within the 25-foot slide setback. And so
Correct.
how realistic, if it needed to go through the whole building process again, that it would even be built in that location and that. But if they're allowing you to use the previous permit that was granted just not
Right.
too long ago, then that answers that question.
Yeah, we've gone over that with building and safety several times, so I think it's very clear with them
Okay.
that because it's non-habitable, it can be within the slide setback.
Okay. All right, I'd like to open the public comment for 468 Conejo Road. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on this item? No. Have we received any letters on this project?
not to my knowledge, unless
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Well, I went out to the site and drove around the neighborhood, get a feeling of what's coming back. It's nice to see that a lot of the homes are into construction. And I think your requested modification is appropriate and consistent with the zoning ordinance. It represents just a minor increase, like staff said. You do have a constrained lot. It's A1 zone, supposed to be an acre, and you're 9,000?
9,700?
Yeah, so you're under that, and you also have slopes to contend with, and you have 21%. So there is a number of constraints on this site that would lead you to want to rebuild in this area, along with the slide setback that you have. So given all those factors in account, I can make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project subject to that condition.
Okay,
And
very
then
good.
my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they have oversight authority of all my actions. And if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day appeal period. And if either of those were to occur, Ms. Brooke would contact you.
Okay,
Okay.
very good.
right,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Here's my set. Okay, the next item is on Lincolnwood, 3735 Lincolnwood. If the applicant would like to come up. Good morning.
Good morning. Ooh, nice colors.
Okay, this item is 3735 Lincolnwood. There's an existing residence and two-car garage on the property. Here you see the outline of the property. It's zoned E3 with 20-foot front setbacks and 6-foot interior setbacks. The proposal that requires a modification is the enclosure of a second-story balcony, and also included in that is the creation of a small storage area in that portion of the residence, which, as it turns out, is just inches into the interior setback. So it is technically requires a modification to do that. It is altering the structure within the setback. It is very minor. As you can see on the second sheet, the amount of encroachment into the setback, here it's showing the first floor plan, the creation of this small storage area under the second-story balcony. It's just almost the thickness of the wall that's encroaching into the setback. So for that reason, staff is supportive of the requested modification to allow that enclosure of the balcony and creation of the storage closet on the first floor due to the minimal amount of encroachment and the unanticipated impacts to the adjacent neighbors. So we request that the staff hearing officer make the findings in the staff report for the project as submitted.
Great, thank you. If you'd like to state your name for the record and add any additional comments.
My name's Doug Rees. I'm the architect for the project, and what we're basically doing is just enclosing the deck that already exists. The roof is already going to remain. And when we had the project surveyed, because of the trapezoidal shape of the site, there's one little corner of that deck that actually protrudes into the side yard setback roughly about 10 inches. And so the idea is to keep the roof, keep the structural supports, all of that stuff. We're just going to use an infill into the two walls. And primary purpose for that is to add a little bit of privacy to the adjacent neighbor and to this homeowner, because as we're closing into the side yard, which is the deck that overlooks into the neighbor's backyard also creates the reverse. So when the neighbor's in the backyard looking up to the deck, so they say they never use that deck. So the idea is to fill in the space and use it as basically what it's going to end up as is a closet. But for the purpose right now is that the client is in a motherly way, and that's going to become a new little baby room for the short term, and then the long term it'll be converted into a closet for the upper floor area. And then from an architectural standpoint, I've enclosed the bottom floor just to give it so that architecturally it's not going to appear as a second story mass over the top of a open area. So the purpose of the plan is that there's a pop out, if you see on the elevations. Right. The rear portion of this particular residence pops out, and then the deck is right there. So we're basically just enclosing from post to the wall and then around on the other side. So we're basically just removing the handrail and then framing it in and then matching the siding that's on the two sides there to bring it up to architectural. This being the original plan, this being the revised plan.
So no windows.
And no windows on that side, Jim. And then on the other elevation, this being looking out to the backyard, we're going to add one window inside of this space. And then this would be the closet that's below it, still accessing the doors out of this being the lower floor, this being the upper floor. So when they stack over the top of it, this appears to be as an original design rather than something that was added on. So we got favorable comments from single family, and that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. We don't have any questions. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 3735 Lincolnwood? No. Did we receive any letters on this project? No? Okay, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. I went out and drove around, saw the site, and drove around the neighborhood, and lots of nice homes on this street.
What's that?
I said there's lots of nice homes on that
Yeah.
street. But I was trying to get an idea of the setback, what's on the other side, what kind of impact. And I agree with you and with staff that this enclosure of the patio significantly decreases the impacts to the neighbor. It's providing a solid wall in that area. It's making it both, private from both vantage points, from the subject property and adjacent property. And so therefore I think it is an appropriate improvement. And the amount of encroachment is very small and therefore supportable. So I make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project. And there are no conditions proposed, and I don't believe any are warranted. So it's approved as submitted. And like I said, on the first project, my action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. And they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they determine it warrants additional discussion before them, they can call it.
We might want to repeal it, but no.
Appeal approval. Yeah. So if that was to occur,
That would be the first, right?
Yeah. So it's approved.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. So the last project is 4119 San Martin Way. If the applicants would like to come up.
Morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Anytime you're ready.
Okay. This is 4119 San Martin Drive. The lot is zoned R2 with an SD2 overlay, and the lot is currently vacant, so this is brand new construction on the property. It's approximately just over a 5,900 square foot lot. You see the outlines here, and it is on a corner of San Martin Way and Verona Drive. Again, as I mentioned, it's zoned R2, so it is subject to 20-foot front setbacks on both sides and a 6-foot interior setback. The proposal is for a new residence and attached 2-car garage. The proposed residence is just over 2,000 square feet with a standard 2-car garage. The requested modification before you today is with regard to the open yard. There is a requirement for a 1,250 square foot open yard in this zone with minimum 20-foot dimensions. Given the width of the lot, which is exactly 60 feet, and the configuration of the proposed development, it gets squeezed to the point where they can't provide the minimum 20-foot dimension back here due to the 20-foot setback, the minimum 20-foot interior dimensions of the garage. So given the thickness of the walls of the garage, when we get back to the open yard, it's just over 18 feet in this dimension. So they are proposing to provide the required 1,250 square feet in 2 locations, which is allowed in this zone. However, they cannot meet the 20-foot minimum dimension in that particular part of the open yard, and that is the requested modification. They have about 765 square feet of open yard here and 491 square feet here in the secondary front yard. And through staff's review of this project, it has been noted on the plans that this has been identified as the secondary front yard and that the primary front yard is the frontage off of San Martin Way. And so with that determination by staff, this open yard here is allowed to encroach up to 10 feet from the front setback. So as it's shown there, that open yard is consistent with our determination of that frontage being the secondary front yard. So staff is requesting approval of the requested modification. There is one issue that was brought to our attention very recently that we will need to address today in some manner, and that is the fact that this proposed trellis portion over this area of the open yard exceeds the allowed 20% encroachment into the open yard. We missed the portion of the code that states that no more than 20% of each open yard area could be encroached upon by structures. It does meet the first part of that code section that says that the overall open yard can't have encroachments more than 20%, which it does because it's under 250, which is 20% of 1250, but it also goes on to state that in each open yard area you can't have more than 20% encroachment, and it doesn't meet that. So we do want to have the hearing and discuss the project as it's proposed. If that particular element were to stay in the project, we would need to notice that as an additional modification needed in order to approve the project as it's proposed currently on these plans. So that was something that was missed by staff. It was not noticed as an additional modification being required for this particular design. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, great. Thank you. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
My name is Dana Longo, and I'm here with my wife, Rain Longo. We are the applicants. We are in escrow right now. As soon as these permits issue, we can close escrow and get financing for our construction loan. So we're hoping to...
Oh, you know what? Sorry, that means you weren't on the mic.
Sorry. So we're hoping to get this done, obviously, as easily and efficiently and with minimal controversy as possible. And that's how we designed this whole house, is to, build exactly what we could to meet the planning requirements, and that's our goal. We want to do nothing but that. Now, is the issue here which is the front yard? Is that something we're discussing today, or
I can explain my concerns why I informed staff that I didn't think it could be heard today.
Okay.
I think it's been 2 years ago. We processed a series of amendments through the process, went to Planning Commission, through Ordinance Committee to City Council, and we made various changes to the zoning ordinance. One was allowing the open yard area to be provided in separate areas in single-family zones. I know this is R2. It's also to allow the open yard area to be in the secondary front yard in areas with multiple street frontages, because that was a constraint that property owners had, trying to fit in the development and do the open yard area. And when you have two front yards, the only place is in the back. And generally, like on a corner or a through lot, there is a front yard and there is a backyard. Although per our old zoning ordinance, it was both front yards, and so you couldn't have your open yard in the front yard. So we went through the process and we discussed it in public hearings, and we came up with a concept of a primary and a secondary front yard. And we also clarified the definition of front yard. It used to be, it was the longest parallel line from the front yard, so you could have a front yard here, here, and then where there's no building, we'd come back up to here, and it was just awkward in different situations. So we also redefined the front yard. So in your situation, the front yard, you have two front yards. One, you draw the lines this way, and you come all the way down here, and then where there's no building, here. So from San Martin Way, this is your whole front yard. From Verano, again, we do our, here's the building, so we drew our lines like this, and we come out, and then here. So all this is your front yard here. So if we take Verano, and you can have your open yard in your secondary front yard. So if we take Verano as being your your primary front yard, and it's generally your entrance, the main entrance, which in your case, it is the entry doors here, it's facing Verano Drive. You come in, your garage is facing Verano Drive. I would say this is your primary. If we do it that way, this area right here is your secondary front yard. And so that's where you can have your portion of your open yard area up to 10 feet from the property line. If you take San Martin as your primary front yard, this is your primary front yard, so here's your open yard area over here. So your portion of your open yard area is in the front yard, which is not consistent with the zoning ordinance. And if it was proposed to stay here, it would need another mod. And then the provision with breaking up the two, we also clarified that when you provide your open yard area in two areas, that 20% coverage is for each area. And we did that because we didn't want the instance where one of the open yard areas was totally covered and the other one wasn't. The idea is to have it open, provide openness between buildings, recreation area. There's lots of justifications or reasons for open yard area. And so that's why we clarified that only 20% of individual areas, when they are provided in individual areas, can be covered.
Okay. Well, as far as the covering goes, I mean, we're not married to that idea. We can take away these beams here, and it'd be wide open, and I think that would correct the problem. And in our brief discussion with Ms. Brooke yesterday, she said that, that would then no longer be a covered space, and so I'd be more than willing to offer that as a concession.
Yeah, we talked to our architect last night, and we just said we'd remove it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we still have the problem of the open yard area being in the front yard.
Yes, we do. And to that, I have a couple of comments. One is just to say that the door opens to the longer access property, that is not the definition of a front yard. Now, we have a couple of neighbors. The neighbor here, their front door opens along the long axis of the property, and the across the street neighbor over here, their front door opens along the long axis of the property. We brought in a couple of pictures to show that. Here's a nice map. I can show you that.
So what we're doing with this plan is we're pretty much staying consistent with what the other houses in the neighborhood and the development have on their site locations.
The front door of this property is right here. The front door of this property is kind of in the middle, right there. And the front door of this property, this to me looks like the longer access. This front door actually opens this way.
You know what? This development is all interesting in this layout because I reviewed a modification last hearing on Consuelo here, and it was a duplex, and the entry was in the front on the front unit, and you had to go around the back in the back unit. So it is all different here. I take a various looks at what is the front yard. What is the primary front yard? As you can see, it's oriented this way, as this is being the entry. You do have a walkway up here, but this is actually not even an issue, because if we were to say that this is the primary front yard, it extends all the way to here, and you can't have your open yard area in the primary front yard.
Well-
So whatever one we pick, it doesn't make
When
a
we went through this in the very beginning, we had this checked in the early parts. We had Renee take a look at it before we even submitted. We had Roxanne look at it. We had plan checkers plan check it. We've gone a long ways. We've already gotten our approvals from ABR.
No, you had comments. You
I mean,
can't get
comments.
approvals before you
Exactly,
get
but
the
we had
modification approved.
unanimous, okay, it wasn't approval, but
It was a unanimous
Whatever it is, I
consent
can't-
to have it
Okay,
go on to the
well,
next
I
level.
can't approve a plan that is inconsistent with the zoning ordinance without a modification being requested.
I don't understand the modification. If we take this trellis out,
because she's saying that we cannot have San Martin as our primary
No,
entrance.
it doesn't matter which one it is. Even if you were to redesign it and have the front, put a door here. I mean,
So why did
say-
planning not tell us any of this before? Why is this coming up after we've already got almost all of our detail sheets done for ABR's resubmittal? Why does this come up now? Why did not one planning person identify this earlier on in the process? Why did not one person
I
check
can-
this and
I
say
cannot.
the
Excuse
open
me,
yard can't be
excuse me.
here?
Excuse me, okay. I review the project when it's given to me. I review the packet. I look at the site plan. That's the zoning requirement. I cannot approve a project that does not meet the zoning requirement. If you want to go forward and to keep the way it is and request an additional modification, we can continue it and it could be renoticed. I understand your frustration, but I can't, there's not a finding in here, a provision in here that says that allows me to prove something that's not consistent with the zoning ordinance.
We found it consistent with the zoning ordinance. That's the problem.
I'd like to speak to a couple of other issues here. All along Verona Drive, we can't park there because there's a bus stop here, and then, I should say our guests can't park there. And then there's our driveway, so there's no room to park there. So if we have guests come over, it would be very easy for them to park. You could fit at least 2 cars here. And then we have a nice decomposed granite walkway that goes onto the porch and into the entry of the house. That to me seems to be a rather neighborly feel. And we also haven't seen our landscape plan, but what we're going to do is we're going to have vegetable planter boxes here, some citrus trees, maybe some lawn. And over here on the San Martin side of the property, we're going to have some lawn and some, welcoming landscaping so that, when somebody shows up at the house, it's going to look like the front yard. It's going to feel like the front yard. So I think that, between, guests coming over and then the look of the house as you pull up to it from San Martin, you have definitely a front yard feel. Now, another thing and I think the most compelling reason as to why we shouldn't designate Verona as our primary front yard, is that my albeit limited understanding of the way the zoning ordinances work, is that if you designate Verona as our primary front yard, the way that the ordinances work, the maximum width of the structure that we could put on this property would be 14 feet. And if you do that, can you imagine what our daily routine would look like if...
Why?
Setbacks.
Because of the setbacks.
There's 20 foot. How does it change it?
Well, I'm kind of going off what my architect has told me and just, my brief review of this.
It'd be the
but-
same setbacks, just your 20 foot because of the SD3, and it'd be 6
But we
foot and
can't-
3 foot. So
But we can't get our open yard with
I-
the configuration of that as our, that's why. There's no way to get open yard on this lot.
Well, it's
what
a
hasn't been-
small
That's why it
lot.
hasn't been
It's a small
designated.
lot. It's a constrained lot, so maybe a smaller size building would be a way. But
If you require this, you're going to commit this property to a lifetime of blight because nobody will be able to undertake the expense.
I can't
of,
talk about the supportability of a modification here. Okay, if you want to go forward with this, you can apply for another modification, and we can have the hearing here, notice it, see if anybody's concerned with it, have the discussion, and I can take action on that. I'm not saying that it's not buildable. What I'm just telling you is what our code says, and I can read it. It says, for a definition of front yard, a yard extending across the full width of the lot between the front lot line and the nearest wall of any main building of the lot. Well, that's an easy thing to do. You draw like this. So you draw all these lines till you hit a building. Okay, so we got all the building. This yard shall be measured by extending perpendicular lines from each point of the front lot line to the nearest wall of any main building on the lot. Where there is no wall of any main building on a lot which intercepts said perpendicular lines, the yard will terminate at a point determined by extending a line parallel to the front lot line from the corner of the front elevation of the main building nearest to the lot line. So that's how you draw the line here. So this is all your front yard. So then we go to the open yard area, open yard requirement, which I don't have that section of the code, but that's the one where it says that it has to be 1,250 square feet, and it could be in two areas. If it has multiple street frontage, she has it there. It has multiple street frontage. It can be in the secondary front yard up to 10 feet from the property line. Well, if this is your primary. If I go with saying this is your primary, this is the only area which is the driveway, which wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So your only option with this layout and this plan is to take your chances and see if the mod's approvable. You need to apply for modification to allow the portion of the required open yard area to be located in the front yard. So you need a modification to allow it in the front yard and a modification for the not meeting the 18 or the 20-foot dimension there.
Well, we have that modification on calendar.
Yeah.
This one here.
Yeah, but I can't approve that one because you only have 750 or 765 square feet.
So essentially what you're saying is you want us to apply for a modification to allow this front area to be in our secondary front yard.
I am telling you what the zoning ordinance requirements are, and you decide what you want to do. It doesn't sound like you're interested in redesigning. Your options would be to redesign to comply, and then if you wanted to go forward with this, then the other option would be to have the continuance and have it renoticed and request that additional mod, because as proposed right now, you need, you'd need a mod for this too. There'd be needed 3 mods on here.
Where's the third mod? I'm sorry.
Well, if you decide to keep the trellis, but if you just
I
want to
see.
remove it, then it's just the 2 mods.
You know this is modular. You know that we don't have a lot of give on how we can't change the space. It has to be, they're big cells that get dropped in. When you say decrease the size of the house, we're talking about a substantial decrease. I mean, that's almost unlivable decrease.
It's pretty much going to kill the project if we
yeah.
don't get
I
this.
mean, so
That's
there's,
just an option that you have to look at. And it sounds like it's not an option
it
to
can't
you.
be an option.
Okay.
Did you answer a question why they went down the, my name is Gerald Jackman, I'm a family member, why they went down all
You
the way?
need to be on the map.
Why they went
Yeah,
all the
we've
way
already
down
gone
this?
through all that. I don't want to get
Well,
argumentative and all that.
No,
I
I'm just
cannot
curious.
approve a
I
project.
didn't hear an answer to it.
I didn't either. I didn't really get
Okay,
an
I
answer.
do not get involved in a project until it is put on the agenda and I get the packet and the plans and review it. I cannot tell you, I do not know what went on beforehand. I stay removed from everything. Although I'm in the same building, I do not have any contact with anyone regarding a project. So I cannot answer that question. All I can tell you is what's before me right now does not meet the zoning ordinance requirements.
Okay, because they made an effort to go through the staff to make sure that
Okay.
they...
I understand that, and I totally understand the applicant's...
It's a very costly, abrupt stop for us.
Okay, and I understand your frustration.
I don't know if you do, actually. I don't think you possibly understand.
Okay, so,
It's, you know, we'll
well, I've closed the public hearing, okay? You know what? You know what? No, okay. That's not appropriate, okay?
Why isn't it appropriate?
Your language, okay?
What was my language?
You know what? This is fine, okay? So I cannot take action on this item today. I can continue it indefinitely because it needs to be noticed. I don't know what date, how it would work in terms of, it doesn't matter if I continue to a particular date or not because it needs to be renoticed and the date on the notice that's mailed to the neighbors. But it could, our next meeting is November 3rd, so 2 weeks from today. And, you know, if there is adequate time for the noticing, it could be on that hearing.
Okay, that's your decision.
Okay, great.
We can't appeal your decision for today, can we?
We can. We have 10 days to appeal.
Okay.
No, that's not, I continued
doesn't-
it.
Oh, you continued it.
Yeah, it's no
So
action.
what can we do if we decide that we don't like your decision on this?
We have to request a
have-
modification.
But if we don't
You know
want
what,
to go that
you
route,
can discuss it with Renee out of the, have a meeting with her and what the next steps are, okay? Thank you. I adjourn the meeting.
All right.